Yeah, you start with yourself, right? You create your own soil. You identify what's missing from yourself first, because I see so many people that really like they get aggravated, they get upset, and they go out to their employees or project managers and say, "Hey, why isn't this done?" Well, what is it that you're seeing in your own life that's not done?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their business and grow their team. And I'm here today with Jim. Jim, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure thing, Ben. My name is Jim Becker. I am the CEO of Becker Logistics. We've been around for 27 years now. We started in 1997. We reached a peak of about $182 million in sales, and that was in 2022. And it's been a great journey. And we're based here in Chicago. Pre-COVID, we had about 11 offices from Canada all the way through the United States. And now post-COVID, we only have one office located here in Glendale Heights, Illinois. I've been married now for 20 years. I have two beautiful children. My wife, Lori, gave birth to our 14-year-old Sydney and our 11-year-old Brooke. And we have two cats. And it's really fun living here in Chicago with, the four seasons and really enjoying the world of transportation, if you will.
Yeah, awesome. All four seasons with the short spring and short fall. I'm down here in Texas, and I feel like I feel the same thing. Instead of the long winter, I get a long summer. So Jim, I love to kind of get to know you a little bit and understand your origin story. What was your first job? And I mean like the first dollar you earned. For me, I had a paper route when I was like a teenager. What was your first job?
Well, it's funny you say paper route. I did have a paper route. I think that probably lasted for about 2 weeks. Getting up early in the morning, having those little manila folders to put your 60 cents or 40 cents in. But that wasn't really my first job because I quit it as soon as I got it. I think I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9. I was about 10 years old and I was working at a tire shop right around the corner in the city of Chicago off of Irving Park in Richmond. And I'd get paid $2 an hour to basically sweep the floors and roll the tires out to the alley. And they taught me how to you know, patch and repair tires. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then I do odd jobs like help the landlord in our apartment building blacktop the roof. It was pretty interesting growing up in the city in the early 70s.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, what toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
Toy or hobby. It was pretty interesting as a child living in the city of Chicago. I used to be a drawer and I drew all the time. And I still have this semi truck that I drew. It was a refrigerated truck. And I gave it to my neighbor that lived across the street. He was older than me, kind of like an older brother. And he gave that to me like 20 years ago and said, "Hey, did you know you drew this? And you actually ended up in logistics and in the transportation world." And that was pretty interesting. Um, but for hobby, I was probably a runner mostly when I was in grade school and high school. And then I ended up in dance somehow. And, the choreography of dance and being a dance professional and coaching others, that was kind of like what I really saw. It's a way of giving back to the community.
Cool. Well, what was your favorite and least favorite course in college?
My favorite courses were math. I really enjoyed math. Um, and my least favorite was science. Yeah, it was my least favorite was science.
Well, what quote from a famous person lives rent-free in your mind?
I have one by the unknown, and you talk about living rent free. That would be the faintest ink is better than the best memory. Another quote is just knock and the door will be open, and that's from the Bible, direct quote. So that one's always living there.
That's awesome. Explain the meaning of the faintest ink is better than the best memory.
Absolutely, it's through an experience. It's through life. Our experiences really give us the carnal knowledge, right? We think about the knowledge that we get and educating ourselves, the book that we're reading, or the next book that we're going to be reading, or the book that we did read. And as we go through this, it's giving us knowledge, but nothing really gives us what we really need other than the experience of doing it. So the faintest ink is better than the best memory. Whenever I'm speaking at a convention, whenever I'm writing something, it takes me several different renditions to do that. So as I'm writing and writing and writing, rewriting, and really meticulously looking for the best words for each and everything that I'm trying to express or convey from here to over there, where you, the listener, is, I'm trying to find the best ink. And as I'm going through the bottles of ink, the faintest ink is better than the best memory, meaning our minds are ephemeral. They're built to forget. So the more that we have the repetition of learning, the more that it's going to stick for us as we move forward.
Yeah, that's cool. The journaling practice is something that I've recently picked up within really the last year, and I've realized how powerful it is just to be able to journal things that are stressing me out or things that are frustrating me and to process through them, just in pen and paper. It offers me a certain clearing that I don't think I would get any other way.
Well, Ben, I mean, you nailed it right there. It gives you a clearing. As we look out at that field, when we're journaling, what that allows us to do is it allows us to be complete with what we have in our life. So when you're journaling from the end of the day, some would call it revisioning, right? Or recasting. What we're able to do is write down all the things that worked and all the things that didn't work. And either way, we're complete with it, allowing us freedom to go ahead and move forward.
Right, totally. So what do you think the greatest innovation or discovery in the past 300 years was?
300 years. Well, I'd have to go with electricity.
Yeah, that's a favorite choice from my guests. Yeah, because where would we be without light, and certainly we wouldn't be doing anything with computers without electricity.
Right. And when you look at it, you have to look at the epistemological process of things. You can't say internet because internet wouldn't be around without electricity. You couldn't say microchip because microchip would not exist without electricity.
For sure. So what tech trends significantly impacted your industry, and how did your company respond?
The internet really impacted our industry. I've been in this industry since 1991. In 1991, they really didn't have much of the internet actually working. It was there, but it wasn't as rampant as it is now. And it's pretty interesting, as I watch that evolve over the years, and then us starting our own business in 1997, it was pretty interesting to watch it go from, we used to have those fax machines with the funny feeling paper to having emails, and then going from emails to really having flat files or APIs or, EDIs, if you go back a little bit. And, watching that whole process where we started having modems that were communicating slowly, of course, and having the dial up, you have mail in 1995. I can remember that very clearly. It was pretty interesting watching that whole chain of events happen. And you can see it now happening again with the cryptocurrency. And as that's reaching a certain milestone where that should be taking off as well.
And how's that affecting logistics? I don't definitely participated with a couple of peers in the logistics industry, but is there any technology innovations that you're betting on to drive your business growth?
Well, there's certain things that we can bet on, and that's usually like the EDIs um, and the APIs have really helped out a lot with our industry, allowing us to really transfer that information a lot quicker, right? And I would say almost like geofencing. and allowing the traceability to actually happen. Now that we have regulations that allow the trucks to communicate exactly where they're at so that we know where our freight is at all times. I'm still waiting for the next level of technology that allows us to have some type of general ledger, if you will, like an 8XRP or Ethereum, some way that when we are doing transactional freight, that there's some type of tokenization that says this, here's Jim and Ben communicating. And I have a tokenization that as I transfer this over to you and you transfer it over to me, I can look at these two and say, this is legit. No one else is going to be on this meeting with us, or no one's going to be taking this load from me. This is the person that I contracted and it's legit. So that's what I'm really waiting for that type of piece of technology to really come to fruition.
Yeah, just because we spend so much time as a Web2 business in the contract and payments, and the shipping charges are kind of a separate animal from the cost of goods sold. But should it be, right? If cryptocurrency and Web3 were really part of it, I would pay for my goods to be delivered. And as soon as I paid for the goods to be delivered, the shipping provider would get their piece, and everybody can, similarly to how the driver for an Uber transaction gets paid right when you pay Uber, like that all seems to work out. Why doesn't shipping work in a similar way?
That's right. Yeah, if you could have that on one ledger, right? And that as soon as that's done, that whole transaction, once it's complete, all parties in line are all set up, and the bank's set up to receive monies. The accounting people know who the accounting people are. The driver knows who the trucking company is, and the broker or whoever else is involved. Everybody knows who's who, just with that one general ledger.
Yeah, and in logistics, how are folks accommodating like the increase in data availability? I would imagine most trucks now, the consumer version of it was like Automatic, I think was the brand name, where I could plug it into the code reader of my car. I could now get all of this data, into a SaaS platform, like my gas mileage, my average speed. Um, I would imagine this is happening too with trucking, where you have access to all this data about how different drivers are performing, not only the geolocation of the freight, but is this driver driving safely? Are they following all the rules and regulations of being a good transportation engineer, if you will? How are you guys accommodating that kind of burst of data availability and turning it into insights?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ben. For us, we're an intermediary, so we're a freight broker. So we don't have access to that information on the assets side. So us being that intermediary, I could tell you that information on the carriers and what lanes they choose or haul for us, what days of the week they haul for us, what time are they picking up for us. I can give you all that information, or the length of um, haul, how many miles. It was 626 miles for this carrier, and this carrier is more of a local carrier doing only 260 miles. I can give you that information, or how many times they've gone out of Chicago or out of Memphis or out of Dallas for us, and how many times they've gone in from what city and state they've come in from Dallas. So that, let's say carrier B comes in from Charlotte, 20 times a month to Dallas, and that same carrier B only comes into Chicago maybe twice a month. And then carrier B probably comes into Memphis maybe 10 times a month. Where carrier A, 100 shipments are coming in from Charlotte, North Carolina into Chicago, and 50 times from Charlotte, North Carolina down to Dallas. I'd probably be using the statistics on that to utilize said carrier A over carrier B. Does that make sense?
Totally. So that's cool. So you're driving more of a freight marketplace or a brokerage. So you're able to see the transportation demand and then know the suppliers that are fulfilling it. And run a lot of data on that. Um, and but you probably have a lot more data available to you today than you ever have been. Is there any ways that you guys are working to keep up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We are using BI, Microsoft BI, Dynamics, if you will, as much as possible. It's really giving us that visual database over Tableau or something else that we can actually see exactly what the trends are, or where we should really be concentrating on, or where we should be walking away from. It gives us to the ability to see what our strengths are.
That's cool. What are the most significant gaps between your ambitions and the realities today?
Well, right now the gap is the economy. We've been in a deflationary marketplace now for about, almost 2 years now. And so the idea here is to really identify, when is this recession going to happen? I already see that we're in a recession, and the government's saying, no, we're not. And so there's going to be a point in time when the government finally says, maybe around January or February, that, hey, we've been in a recession for the last, 3 quarters. Just want to let you guys know.
Tell everybody what they already know, right?
Yeah, we all know already, but they're like mom and dad trying to say everything's fine. Mom and dad don't have a problem. And then one day they sit down with you and say, hey, we're getting a divorce. Has nothing to do with you kids, right? I've never seen that in any other relationships I've been in. And but it's just funny because it's like the government's trying, we're here to help you, not to inform you.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting dichotomy that what if the government was here to inform you and not help you? That would change a lot of things. What do you think the biggest challenge is to maintaining your competitive edge in the industry, given those gaps and given the things that you've seen over the last many years?
Yeah, I would say, it really comes back down to relationships. Still in transportation, it's all about relationships. It's not necessarily the cheapest price that works. It's that relationship where I feel a lot of people are missing that. Just as a consumer myself, noticing in different industries that that relationship has really changed. I don't eat at McDonald's quite often, but I just went out to Northern California to the Mount Shasta area, and my friend from high school, 40 years ago, him and I were in a McDonald's, and I'm watching him, use this kiosk to put all the order, and it seemed like it took 5 times longer to really just kind of get you just off your game. Where just as a computer guy, I would say it'd be a lot easier to program that a little bit better way, but they have it programmed in a certain way. So what that's done is it's taken away the human aspect of things, of being at the register, where that greeting, that customer service, that smile, if you will, that interaction of human being. I feel we're going to be losing that as time goes on, and that's going to be a luxury for certain people to have that as an added on value, that here you go, So that's just how I see it. Just like I have a Tesla, and I have the full driving capability on it, and I don't have to touch the steering wheel. At some point in time, we're going to lose these Uber drivers or these taxi, cab drivers, and we're going to lose that interaction too. We're going to be losing that touch. I don't know what's going to really replace it, right? Other than maybe getting there faster, maybe getting there, quicker. These cars are just driving around aimlessly. I don't know. I get a pickup in 5 minutes instead of waiting, 10 or 15 minutes for a taxi or an Uber to show up.
Yeah. I was my wife and I had a double date the other night, and after dinner we cruised by a gelato place, and the gelato shop couldn't have been more than 1,000 square feet tops. I mean, it was a small gelato place, and they had kiosks, and it was just weird to me that there was like a line to get to the kiosk, and then I mean, they had a mess of people behind the counter serving up the gelato. But it's just a simple transaction to have so much tech involved. I just yeah, it was kind of lost on me why people had to go figure out how to do the ordering on a big, giant iPad before. I don't know that it really created that much efficiency. And, what would have been wrong with like, hey, what can I get for you? Okay, here's your, pay me. And so yeah, I thought that was bizarre to have a kiosk style in a super small gelato place. Like how many items can somebody even really order? So let me ask you this. This gives some insight. We're all planning and we're all trying to tie our strategy, our business strategy to our technology roadmap. So what advice can you share, or how do you tactically do your strategy planning, and then how do you connect technology roadmaps with that overall business strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, what I'll do is I'll look at the long journey. Where do I really want to be in 5 years? And out of that 5 years, I go ahead and say, all right, let's break this down a little bit closer in chunks of like 1 year each. And if that's what I really want, I want A through Z, if you will, in the fifth year. Now I go ahead and break those 26 letters down and break that down into 4 or 5 years and really just look. And then on per quarter for each one of those years, what are my milestones? What is that thing I'm doing over the next 12 to 13 weeks on each one of those quarters to really say, this is what's going to be done and then complete. And how many of those quarters are we really blowing off? Oh, that wasn't done. Okay, that wasn't done. I really feel like the gap there, a lot of people will think this beautiful thing and have this budget to invest so much money onto that project. And here they wait, 5 years to find out that they can't even use this product. Where instead of just starting out slowly and ramping up, because you start out with one thing and then deadlines are pushed off, and then you find out that maybe even after the first year or two, you're ending up with something completely different, and times do change along the way. So looking at it more at a strategic standpoint like that and getting small wins to win that war instead of just saying, okay, we're going to win the war, and then you're not really paying attention to anything presently. You're kind of stuck into just the future or the past and not really being present with what's going on from the day to day.
Yeah, for sure. I'm seeing a lot of like a trend recently is mechanisms of time compression. So, taking more of an aggressive look on the quarter, where you're breaking that quarter into the weeks, and then, okay, what do I really need to get done in this week? EOS is doing a great job with that, with kind of a fairly rigid or complete understanding of, like, they suggest an offsite every 90 days. And because I think we're getting a little bit overstimulated with our annual planning where, hey, okay, this is where we're going to be at the end of the year, but then Q1, we have plenty of time. Q2, we can still catch up. And then by Q3, we're, just putting tons of pressure on the sales team. And we've kind of, now we're feeling behind, and it ends up, everybody's kind of running around in chaos mode towards the end of the year to try to hit those annual goals. So love these ideas of really trying to see how to break that down into the milestones. Is there any tips and tricks that you use in that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways, and I like to break it down instead of using something from a piece of software or something being written in, C++ or something, looking at it more from like just outbound phone calls, right? If you look at an outbound phone call or even like a post, let's just talk about social media and you're making a post. Well, if at the end of the quarter, after 12 weeks, you want X, and if you say, well, if I want X, I really need to be doing, you know, 2 posts a day, right? And when you start thinking about it, right, this is where leadership comes in. There's a lot of management that can handle these things, but it really needs management and a leader that's actually exercising leadership as their natural self-expression. When that leader comes in, they can actually say, here, let's break this down, and then have someone manage that. So the idea would be, if you were talking about phone calls and an 8-hour day, and you wanted to make, 32 phone calls a day, well, that 32, there's 4 quarter hours, right? In every hour, there's 8. That gives you 32. So you would need to do somewhere in the area. Let's just break it down by one call per hour. Well, when you think of it that way, that doesn't seem too hard for you and I, Ben, right now. We can make that one call, and it gives us 14 minutes to do whatever else we want. If the phone call took 2 minutes, it gives us 13 minutes to do whatever else. What ends up happening in our life, and the same thing, I'll go give you one more, is doing 2 posts a day. Well, if you have 4 hours to do 1 post, well, it doesn't take you or I to do a post on social media. And then when we do create that post, it might take us a half hour, an hour, plan that 1 hour, 2 hours, and go ahead and create those posts in that day, or plan out 2 weeks and take the whole 8-hour day to plan out the next two weeks of social posts, right? And when we chunk this down, we can now start saying, all right, every 2 weeks, we'll go ahead and we'll have a social media day. We have some type of tool in my Apple phone. I have this little notes section that, hey, I've got this idea. I've got this idea. I put all these ideas down, and then we go to writing. And when we do all this, when you break it down to the simplest forms, those quarterly goals are nothing. What happens is we sometimes get caught on this whole quarterly goal, and we put it off for the first month. The second month, we're like, okay, we'll take a stab at it. And then the third month, we're finding ourselves all like rushing. Oh, well, we need this and we need that. Okay, we'll do it again next quarter. And then we do the same thing to ourselves. And it's like we're on that hamster wheel constantly. And even as myself as a leader, myself as a manager, myself as just a regular employee or a human being, I get caught up into that mundane or checked outness where I don't have presence. And that's why, presence is so important, and having a leader to really look at that and discern what's really needed in these things. So that's my viewpoint on it, Ben.
Yeah, I love that. You sound like a very, I don't know, I'm experiencing you as a very caring people leader. And I think that's really awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question out of order here. How do you cultivate a culture of innovation or digital fluency, or even just high performance within your organization?
Yeah, you start with yourself, right? You create your own soil. You identify what's missing from yourself first, because I see so many people that really, like, they get aggravated, they get upset, and they go out to their employees or project managers and say, hey, why isn't this done? Well, what is it that you're seeing in your own life that's not done? And take an inventory of that and really work on that soil first. And sometimes people don't even realize that. They're seeing all their negative things that are happening in their own life. Everything that they need to be working on, they see in other people.
Yeah, we often talk, if there's a challenge or a struggle, that those things are happening for you, not to you. And it's that shift in perspective. We work a lot on, like a T-shaped professional. So not just software engineering expertise in the fluency of a particular code language or code framework, but also the T-shaped, like, are you a well-rounded professional, a professional that helps their peers and makes the team better, not just deep in our respective technologies.
Yeah. Another way of looking at it is do your own pin test on yourself, right? So you can see what they're really dealing with before just going in there. You don't realize what they're dealing with on a day to day or where they're getting stopped. And most of us get stopped just by what's between our two ears.
And really, I think a culture of empathy is super important. Sympathy is, seeing someone in the valley and like, oh, I feel really bad that you're in the valley. Empathy is this, like, I'm going to go into the valley with you and then we're going to come out together. And I think that's super important from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, I think that is very important and it's something to consider. The same thing too, back to what we were talking about before in the beginning was the whole experience of things. Like you're going to be hitting some things that are going to be really challenging. Are you ready for that? And what preparation have you done? Or are you just going into it half cocked? And in those situations, if I'm always going down to save that individual, to yoke them, if you will, shepherd them, then I'm probably going to be doing that on a regular basis. And not only is the individual or the employee or the partner, are they going to be expecting that in the future? You're now being imprisoned by that as well. You're enslaving yourself into that thing and you've agreed to it. Can you hear that?
Well, so what lessons have you learned from initiatives that failed to deliver expected value?
Really identifying, like you put a project together, maybe it's a $300,000-$600,000 project where you have your programmers here in state, but then you also have programmers overseas. And you're like, hey, I want to be here, and here's the top of the mountain at 14,000 feet. And as we're going along that journey, this is what I'm expecting. Okay, we start, and us as CEOs, us as CTOs, we're all getting engrossed with everything. And another quote I'll give you is trust but verify. So here you put this whole plan together, then you give, let's just say CEO to CTO, you give this project, like this is where we're at. It needs to be going into our ERP system. It should be on these screens. And, 12 months go by and you find out that your CTO or your manager put it in outside of the system, maybe a SharePoint system or something that also has a whole bunch of liabilities and risks to it. And you just invested all this money that you'd be up here at the peak of the mountain. You're not even close to the mountain. And it's not even tied to your ERP system.
Yeah. So Jim, tell me the story. Tell me the story. Yeah. Tell me the story.
I basically entrusted and looked for this manager to really take on a project. And I didn't do that. I didn't follow up. The same things that I preach, I didn't follow up because we get to a point, and I just, all your listeners, I just ask you to look in the mirror for yourself. How often do we feel insecure about the thing that we're working on? Do we really know it all? Do we really know everything about what we're taking on right now? Or do we have our own limitations? And there's some limitations I have. And there's some knowledge or doing that I'm not familiar with. And when it all comes down to it, who am I being? So if I'm being someone that can't go to my boss because my boss is going to yell at me, this manager, I wouldn't yell at this person. But when you look in the mirror and say, who am I being? Can I go to my boss and say, hey, I need some help here? You said you want to be at the top of this mountain, but I'm seeing certain things over here. I think it'd be better to go to this parking lot. Okay, why do you want to go to that parking lot? Well, because of these things. Because what happens is we have a target. You and I are going on a double date, if you will, for a camping trip, and we're going to go to St. Louis, Missouri, let's say. And somehow we end up in Florida. Like, who was asleep and didn't talk to the driver? Like, who's driving? Like you still have to check in to say, how are things going? Let's see where you're at. What's working? Where are you failing? I'm not failing at all. Oh, okay, now I'm going to look under your hood a little bit. Let's really look at this and really identify, like, where does this person need support? And it's the same thing for the people that are parents out there. You know, our kids aren't going to always come to us because they're embarrassed sometimes. So letting them know that they can come to you, employees and kids, and you're not going to be upset with them if they do come to you, and that you're going to be there to support them.
I started offering like fractional CTO services for CEOs for this very reason, because many times they have a great vendor, but the vendor, the vendor relationship or the execution just needs somebody to kind of call balls and strikes on both sides, and oftentimes that's really outside of the CEO's comfort zone. They know their industry super well. They know their business. They know their unit economics. They may even be very well sales aligned and great at building partnerships. But when it comes to this, technology investment, they just don't know quite how to explain the outcome desired and then track against it. And so one of our core values is visibility. Like, it's our responsibility to be understood and make sure that we're both conveying the deeper technical things and the cliff notes, if you will, or the bottom line, and all of that is well organized so that folks, we call it from the boardroom to the code review, right? We want to make sure all of that is aligned. And sounds like you had some struggle there. But what I love about your lesson is not once did you shift responsibility. And I think oftentimes, you have in every situation, you have an opportunity to take responsibility or not, right? I'm either a victim or I'm a creator, one or the other. I can't create the best out of a situation if I'm a victim to the situation. And a popular story is a buddy of mine, he had an employee steal from him. And so, yeah, he could have gotten into victim mode. But as he understood this situation, he started going, okay, well, I didn't do what could I have done better? What could I have done preventing? Even though it wasn't necessarily my fault, this word fault kind of comes up, that I got stole from. How could I take responsibility? And he ran a posthumous background check. And sure enough, that employee had something on their record even before they were hired. So he could have done a background check. He could have done some things that would have avoided the situation. But if he just remained in that, well, it's not my fault mode, then there would have been a lot of missed learnings. So I love that you, that even in that situation, in that story that you told, you still found a way to take responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I take full responsibility over it because I failed. I failed. That's something, to hold to account, to trust but verify. And far too often, we hang it out there either knowing they're going to fail, or we hang it out there because we don't really know how to check in without it seeming like we're checking in.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So any advice that you have for folks that are starting their career journey or just starting maybe a digital transformation journey?
Yeah, I would say start out small with a small project. Depending on what your revenue is, depending on how much cash flow you have or how much money you have to invest, and start with something small before you just go full out. The way I like looking at things is there's 10 projects that you could run right now as a small business owner, a large business owner. There's 10 projects that you could do that are going to really help the bottom line, either, decrease your COGS or increase revenue or profit. Look at those 10 And to be honest with you, one are going to be positive. The other 9 are not going to be positive at all. And out of those 9, 3 won't even ever make it to the finish line. So before you take off on something, take a small project. I use the analogy of just going to the garbage can with a bag of garbage and just identify that, right? Like writing code. I started writing code on a Commodore 64 back in 1983 on a cassette hard drive. And, having my mom and dad check out the code every single time I wrote something new, right? Data test it, as you go through and test that. Find something small that if you're thinking your project's going to cost you $1 million, use something of a $25,000 project and say, okay, let's see if this works. And it might seem super simple and super, not really useful. But once you go through the process, you can see who this partner is that you're working with, this intermediary or the programmer, and say, okay, look, I need an engineer. Oh, whoa, wait a minute. I need a flow chart. Oh, wait a minute. And as we go through, we don't have access to our code. We need to open up those APIs. How much is that going to cost? Oh, that's going to be $300,000. Notice all these things that just start opening up on a smaller project before you go ahead and just say, let's go skydiving, and you jump out of a plane, you don't have a parachute.
Love that advice. In the startup world, it's much harder with the higher interest rates to get funding. And so a lot of materials are coming back up that were very popular say about 15 years ago. There was a whole body of work called around bootstrapping, where when you wanted to start, a project, you said, oh, well, maybe I need to go figure out a guide or a book, an ebook or something simple where I could start to engage my audience. And we had a lot of products with like coming soon pages, or like, hey, if I build it, this is what it's going to be. Are you interested? Sign up for my newsletter. And we just had a lot more of that, where folks were validating a little bit of functionality rather than, going for broke. And I think that's going to come up more and more. And it's exactly what you're saying. Start small, validate, measure twice, cut once. Because money is not as cheap as it used to be, and it may not be for quite some time. So you quoted the Bible, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Are you by chance a man of faith, Jim?
I am a man of faith. I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, and the kingdom of God lives in me. Absolutely.
Awesome. If people like what you had to share today, how should they connect with you?
Yeah, my LinkedIn page is Jim Becker 3PL. My email is jim.becker@beckerlogistics.com. And my cell phone number is 312-719-3117. Just hit me up on a DM, and then I'll hit you back. That's it. Easy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I really appreciate having you on the podcast. We got some great insight from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, my friend.